THAC0. I think you fall in one or two camps when it comes to THAC0. Well, first of all, what does it represent? It simply represents to hit armor class 0. The number you need to roll on a d20 to hit that magic armor class of 0. That's going back to the classic age of roleplay where armor classes started at 9 or 10, depending on which edition, and went all the way down to minuses. So, which of two camps do you think you fall into? Is THAC0 unnecessary maths? Complicates the game? Or is it at the heart of what AD&D and basic D&D and original D&D was? Or would it surprise you to know that THAC0 as a term didn't even exist when original D&D first launched? And within the rule set, you would find attack matrices. So this matrice was designed to give you an idea of what you needed to roll, given your level, to hit various armor classes. And the armor classes were used to define what armor you were wearing, from leather to chain to plate, and then incorporating a shield or no shield. Armor class 9 at the time was considered unarmored with no shield. Of course, this number would be adjusted if you had a high strength or if you had magical gear or any other situational modifiers. But that was it. It was an attack matrice. We're now moving forward to 1977 when first edition was launched along with the basic version of D&D. Would it surprise you to know that first edition actually launched with the monster manual and then the player's handbook and then finally the DMG? Within first edition, you still didn't have the term THAC0. The player's handbook had this fantastic table which took the weapon you were wielding and gave it a modifier based on the armor class you were hitting. This replicated how good weapons were against unarmored people to very heavily armored people. So if you take the battle axe, you would find that if you were hitting someone in plate armor or plate armor with a shield, you'd have a -2 or -3 to your attack roll. However, an unarmored person, AC 10, you'd get a +2 bonus, meaning that battle axes were vicious against unarmored people, but would struggle against heavily armored. You then hit the other side, taking one of my favorite weapons here, the Bec de Corbin. It had a +2 bonus against heavily armored people. This made it very effective at taking down knights in full plate armor, but it had a -1 if you were striking at someone unarmored. It wasn't as effective. However, even attack matrices, let alone THAC0, didn't appear in the player's handbook. You had to wait for the Dungeon Master's Guide a year later before you got those details. And within the Dungeon Master's Guide, again, you had the attack matrices, a split between the different classes. And again, it just provided a list of numbers that would be used to hit various armor classes. But unlike a simple THAC0 calculation, you will notice that within the charts, the number 20 is repeated quite a few times before going to 21, 22, 23, 24, and so forth. So it wasn't a true THAC0 representation, but it was used very effectively in the game along with your weapon modifications to decide whether you hit someone or not in combat. The first mention of THAC0 actually came in 1982, and this was in Polyhedron magazine, issue 4, volume 2, number 1, and it was noted by Frank Menzer that, how did he call it? He called it the score to hit AC 0. From this THAC0 to hit armor class 0, you can quickly add or subtract to find the actual roll needed for any given situation. So that was the first time that THAC0 was officially mentioned. However, we're now moving to a year later, 1983, and the red box set had just come out, a re-release of the basic rules of Dungeons & Dragons, taking you levels 1 to 3. And this is really where I came to the game. I started with the basic rules before moving to first edition and finally on to second. And if we have a look in the basic rules, there is one table. And that table, because it's only first to third level, covers what you need to hit the basic armor classes, 9 to -1. And again, no mention of THAC0. We move forward now through the different basic box sets, and we end up on the Masters box set, the one before Immortals, and pretty much taking you up to level 36. And within here, you have the final attack matrices, or hit roll charts as they call them. Very complicated, quite long-winded, covering all the different classes, including demi-humans and the demi-human attack categories when they max their levels. Yeah. At a young age, I struggled to understand this. However, there was an adventure, first edition, 1985, Isle of the Ape, that came out. And in here was the first official mention of THAC0. And here we see THAC0 mentioned. The Witch Doctor, its armor class, level, its THAC0 and its hit points. And fantastic. For the first time now, you didn't have to rely on attack matrices, you had a number that you could use. THAC0 minus the dice result, including all bonuses, was the armor class you hit. Nice and easy for the Dungeon Master to quickly determine whether a creature has struck a player or not. We're now moving forward and we have hit 2nd edition. 1989 is upon us, and for the first time, officially, THAC0 is represented as a rule for the players. And the THAC0 chart, given your level, your class, and what your THAC0 would be, was presented. A nice, easy rule. You could then create your own tables from there if you wanted to, or do mental arithmetics, subtracting your THAC0 from your result to get the armor class you've hit. Back in the day, we had a lot more time. Social media wasn't occupying every minute of our day. And to sit round the table for hours on end, playing out the combats, rolling those dice, seeing if you've got those hits, it wasn't a problem. It was considered part of the game and felt very, very natural. The computer games around the same time, so Pools of Radiance in '88, a full year before 2nd edition, came out. It had THAC0 despite using the 1st edition rule set, and it worked wonderfully. I fell in love with the gold box sets, Pools of Radiance, all the way up to Pools of Darkness, and I loved seeing that THAC0 number continue to drop lower and lower as my characters gained more and more experience. A full 10 years later in Baldur's Gate, and yes, THAC0 is still there, and it brings back such a smile. I loved seeing that THAC0 number. I loved seeing it go lower and lower. I loved my armor classes dropping into negatives and becoming more powerful. It seemed like THAC0 was here to stay. And then along came D&D version 3 in 2000 and 3.5 in 2003. And THAC0 was gone. Attack rolls were in. Base attack bonuses were in, and I hated it. I hated the concept of it. I hated everything that version 3 had become. The simplification of the system, the removal of multiple bonuses on your attributes. I felt this was a travesty to the game. And then I started to run it, and the simplicity of the base attack bonus. Ignoring for now the multi-attacks and the -5s for every attack beyond the first, which I consider an unnecessary complication to the game, but your base attack bonus was fantastic. Combats became that much quicker. People were more in the moment of combat instead of breaking out of that moment to see whether they hit it, doing mental arithmetic or looking at a table. I quickly fell in love with 3rd edition until the power game has ruined it for me. It was too exploitable and it had too many problems, especially around multi-classing. So why did I move so quickly from loving THAC0 to all of a sudden preferring the additive system, the base attack bonus, and adding to your d20, not subtracting? Well, a study was done in 2021 to have a look at why people naturally prefer adding rather than subtracting. And it was a very interesting study, and it proved that from a young age our brains are hardwired to add numbers together, and it takes a lot more effort to subtract numbers one from the other. And this study pretty much said when people think of numbers, it's easier to add. It is a lot harder to subtract. You're jumping through a few more hoops to subtract, you're doing a little bit more effort to subtract. And this is why I think for a lot of people THAC0 is considered unnecessary maths. It's considered complexity that isn't required as part of the game. There is a simpler way of doing exactly what THAC0 does. For me, however, I loved THAC0. It brings back a smile to my face. I love the concept of THAC0. But there is an easier way of doing things now, and that's just adding numbers together. No subtraction, no lookup tables. If you think that THAC0 is unnecessary maths, I completely relate to that, and I agree. But if you think THAC0 is a core part of the classic age of roleplay, the classic D&D era, the AD&D era, then again I can fully get on board with that, and I understand that too. For me, I have fond memories of THAC0, but going forward, I think there are better ways to do what THAC0 used to do. So short of being invited to a classic table, to take part in a great adventure, to roll up a character using the old methods, short of that, I won't miss THAC0, but it has my thanks for the years of joy it has brought me.